Welcome to StoryClicks podcast, where we explore ways to grow a business, develop creativity, and live life better. I'm your host, Māris Prindulis. Have you ever faced a life challenge that cannot be fixed in a day? And you know that it might take months or even years for things to change. And yet, you need to figure out how to do your best work in the face of this uncertainty. My today's guest will share how sticking to your core values can help you find the way through uncertain times. Today's guest is leadership coach Darren Ho. Darren empowers leaders to live without compromise by redeeming their core values. He knows that all leaders face daily pressures from the world, leaving them feeling exhausted, frustrated, hesitant, and often like they're chasing after the wind. Darren founded The Restored Leader, a leadership coaching firm, in 2017 to help clients redeem, protect, and live their core values. As a result, leaders create authentic narratives, giving them confidence and joy in their leadership formation. And I want to add that I'm excited about this interview because I have had a chance to work together with Darren's team for more than a year, helping them with ebooks, website designs, and brand updates. And from this experience, I can confirm that he is someone who is truly protecting his values and is among one of the most kind, intentional people I know. Enjoy the interview with Darren Ho. Darren, thank you for being with us today.
Maris, thanks for having me.
It's a joy to have you on the show. Today, I would like to talk to you about how core values can guide us through uncertain seasons. But before we get to that, could you please share why does defining your core values matter?
Thanks, Maris. I love talking about this. It's certainly at the core of why I do the work I do. And I think it's important to make a distinction here that there are differences between values and core values. And I think the call that I have in my approach to coaching and leadership formation is to make sure we know the difference. So I like to say that values are meaningful things in our lives. But values, as we really change from youth, adolescence, and then into maturing adults, they change. But I think around adult maturity, usually around somewhere between 28 or so onward, I think we start really differentiating the most meaningful things in our lives. And those things we start, I'd like to call core values. So I wanted to make sure that there's a distinction between these two, because core values generally are so true and so important that they define and anchor who you want to become. And we want to get to that and build our leadership on those things, these immovable, defined words that represent who we are, how we see the world, and who we want to become.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is lost when people don't define their core values?
Yes, right. Well, every leader, whoever they are, goes through seasons of which they're unsure. So whether you're leading at home in your family, or you're leading a venture, or you're leading within a venture, maybe one you did not found, right? You're an operator. Whether you are in a nonprofit or a profit, whatever role you have has the potential for influence. And that's simply what I defined as leadership. The real question is how does one really lead authentically and confidently and joyfully? Because if we are to do that, if we are to lead, we're going to be leading through messy, very, very liminal situations. So how do we lead well? How do we lead so that we're not compromising who we are and also the organizations and the people that are entrusted to our care? This was the question that is the thesis of how we formed the Restored Leader. When I was working in a pharmaceutical company for 19 years, I started with the company because of their core values. And that's what really drove me to become part of the company. They oftentimes use these core values in their language, in their practices, in their meetings. And I saw that, and it was so compelling to me. It was very meaningful. And then over time, I started noticing that as pressures to perform by the market really changed the way our executives and our leaders lived those core values, I saw a lot of compromise. And I thought for a moment that that was not normal and that would change back into what I thought was the old days. And it never did. And so what happens is you see a lot of lost decision making. You see decision making that is fully focused on external pressures and changes versus the internal needs of, say, the teams within organizations or the individuals that are going through really difficult times. So without core values, you have no foundational lens to make decisions that are aligned with your mission. And that's why I think it's important that we redeem what is true in our core and we use them in every decision that we make, in every leadership role that we have.
So without defined core values, you have no foundational lens to make decisions that align with where you want to go and who do you want to become, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think core values have a lot to do with making a movement towards a vision. I tend to like to work less on vision, but more on mission. And here, let me make a distinction here. It's very difficult, even with visionary leaders, to really establish a place in the future that is really clear and that is compelling, that we want to be at in the future. It's very difficult. I don't care what any leader says, but this is an extraordinary talent for leaders who can do this. Few leaders can. Okay. Think about that personally. If I ask a question, in 30 years, what is it going to look like for you? How would you have described where you're going to be? What is your leadership going to look like? Who are you going to be around? What are you going to be wearing? What will you look like? Right? That's actually a really hard discussion. But if I asked you, what is the compelling reason you do what you do? That's a mission question. Question. So I think mission is probably a better place to start because I think everybody has and is forming a mission. My question is where are you compromising that mission? Because most of the time, you're compromising that mission because of external pressures, internal changes in you. And you need to be founded on something that is true. And you need to remind yourself of that truth. You need to mantra yourself on that truth so that you can keep going on that mission. Unless the mission is actually not authentically the one you want. So there's some things there to discuss with leaders. But most oftentimes, it's not the mission that's the problem. Most oftentimes, it's the fact that there's so much grieving and issues and pain and loss and that's happening in life right now that we forget we have anchors that we can go to help us know ourselves more so that we can then get back on that mission and keep going.
So defining your core values help you to keep going on your mission and not compromise your mission, right?
Yes. As long as, mission and purpose are probably interchangeable. So if you know that you've started a company and that company has a clear mission, it's to make sense of something or serve a certain group of people or a cause, fantastic. right? So at the Restored Leader, our mission is to help leaders become more authentic, confident, and joyful. That's it. Authenticity means to be in harmony with what you believe. Confident is a nice tension between humility and ambition, that you can confidently hold those two together. And joyful is a posture that you have regardless of the circumstance. I think if leaders have those three outputs of their leadership formation journey, then they're probably going to be leading their mission quite well of their own venture. And to do that, we say, you got to redeem what is true and how you see yourself and make sense of the world. And that's what we think your core values are. So core values are immovable objects that you have to deal with. And when you do, and you're actually embodying them, your mission becomes successful.
Mm-hmm. Now that we are more clear on core values, let's explore the next question. As human beings, we constantly face one of these: uncertainty, pain, and work. Losses happen. We lose loved ones, careers, businesses, and direction, but life keeps going. We still need to work, commit, and build even when many unknowns are involved. How do you help your clients navigate these situations?
Yeah, this is a good question, because this is exactly what happens with our clients. And there's no right answer or one way to do this. Maris, when we have conversations as coaches, there are three core values that hold and anchor our conversations. And this is how we do it. The first thing is that the conversation we have is very intentional and it's focused on the client. There's no need for exchange of pleasantries about who I am. My role is to coach. And so my job is to be fully present for the other. And their job is to fully accept that. So that's a coaching relationship agreement right there. The second core value that anchors a coaching conversation is that it's honest. Honesty is rare. In fact, it's so rare that they can't get that in their organization because of power and distance. And no matter how close they are and how vulnerable they are with their teams, they're at the top or near the top of their organization, and real honesty doesn't really happen. So coaching conversations really host honest, because it's something that they will often not get with their own organizations. The third way we help our clients is through what we believe is grace, the gift that you receive that you don't deserve. Coaching conversations cannot be where someone is so well prepared, or even myself, perfectly well prepared, perfectly present. But there's actually room. There's room for grieving. There's room for longing. There's room for not showing up fully whole. And when you combine those three core values together, you have a wonderful conversation. It's formative, right? So when you combine a grace-filled space where everyone is honest and that every word is intentional and meaningful, not just now, but also as it shapes the narrative of a leader, this is our coaching process. This is what actually is anchoring our conversations. So everything that you asked beforehand about how life works and happens, we bring all of that into a coaching conversation. And to help them navigate, we sit with them through the topics that they want to go through, and we get to a point of wonder and going forward. What does forward look like? And what are the simple next steps towards forward? So we help them untangle what they bring in the moment, in the presence of that moment, so that they can take the best next step forward.
Yes, I like how you said that. Grace-filled space and honesty. And that's so important, because how any one of us can find our way forward if we are afraid to acknowledge the reality of our situation, or we avoid the reality in some ways, right?
Well, I think we anchored and decided that honesty was an important core value for our company because I have experienced so many working relationships with leaders in my previous work, but also within my community, where you have conversations with people you don't have direct relationship with more honesty than you do with the people you have direct relationship with. Do you ever notice that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I felt that was something wrong about that. It's like if I'm closest to somebody, or if I'm working together with somebody, that relationship, if it's truly, and we're on the same mission, honesty needs to be a bigger part of that. Now, in North America here, in particularly, I think in the United States, we tend to shy away from being honest, though we don't shy away from being direct. These are two different things. And I want to make sure that we're clear about the difference. The first one is honesty is sharing to you a truth. And that truth may have my opinion, but it's observed. It is probably observed by multiple people, and it may also include my opinion, but I make that distinction. Being honest is far more important than being direct about my opinion. Yeah, if I'm honest, I don't know everything. But if I'm opinionated, I'll tell you that I have an opinion. So being honest actually takes courage, and it takes some skill. It takes an ability to observe. So practicing being honest is a way to practice having a really meaningful relationship. And that's what we do as coaches. This is what we actually model and encourage for our leaders. And so if you practice that as a core, and it lives within relationship, in this case with our clients, people that we work directly with, well, the result is that we actually become far more, we can be far more productive, efficient, but even more better than that, we are far more seen and known, and we're probably more motivated to find solutions together. So the outcome of actually holding on and practicing a core value, in this case for us, honesty, helps support our clients become more authentic, confident, and joyful. And that's exactly why they hire us. They want to go into their work and they want to make decisions with more authentic confidence and joy. And when we can do that, then everybody wins.
Yes, in a way you answered my next question, which is what improvements happen when people live aligned with their values? And I hear you say that they become more authentic, confident, and joyful.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want. We want leaders to live authentic, confident, and joyful lives. I keep on saying that, and that's part of what we've crafted over the last 4 or 5 years as our missional message. And to do that, we just think coaching is the best tool to help people do that, because you cannot adopt another person's authentic confidence or joy, right, Myers? It's like there's no way you can take mine. I can't take yours. It comes from within. It comes from our own self and our own spirit. The beautiful thing is that when we talk about authenticity, confidence, and joy, as faithful people, we know that the scriptures tell us that Jesus gives us this, especially in John 15. Jesus is speaking about the vine. This is an important metaphor, but important truth, that his joy is given to us, and then our joy overflows. So we must attach ourselves onto truths that help us anchor our cores so that we can go ahead and every day and learn and practice to make these decisions, to see and relate with others through our core values.
So authenticity, joy, and confidence grows from within after you are clear on your core values. So for someone listening and who would like to take some practical steps to discover his core values, what would you suggest?
Well, the first thing is I would say we have a process at Restored Leader to identify the core values of people. And I want to make sure to make that distinction. We're not talking about just values, Maris. We're moving into core values. And to do that, we have to start with identifying interests and passions. So the first two steps that anyone can take is actually list out what are your interests and then what are your passions. So let me make some definitions here. An interest is something that drives your curiosity. A passion is something that you spend a lot of time thinking about because you're curious about it and you really, really love it. You might like it, you might love it, either way. You know where I'm going with this, okay? So here's an example. I have an interest in the weather. I have a passion for brewing coffee. My interest in the weather is that every day I want to know what the weather is going to be like. However, I don't hold that with as much passion or thought that I do with brewing coffee. It's one of my favorite hobbies. I like taking different beans from different regions of the world, and I like brewing them differently and to see which is the best brew for them. So I spend time doing that. Neither of which these two I want to build my life around. Building my life around something means that it's more of a value. Now, here's the thing. Values can be seasonal. Okay? I mean, I like coffee. I might even love coffee. It's a passion of mine. But I'd give it up for something else. So my third question is what really is the root or the intersection of my interest in the weather and my passion for coffee? See, that right there gets you towards a value. And I think that's the first few steps that anybody should take in order to identify the root or the energy thrust, so to speak, sometimes, of why we do what we do. And why are we interested in what we're interested in? And why are we so passionate about certain things? If you list out about 10 passions and 10 interests, you will start seeing some themes within that list, and ultimately will lead you to values, maybe a set of 3, 4, 5 things. Once you have those, the next step is to determine within those values which is really present and makes the most sense as something you want to build your life around. It's actually quite apparent when people go through this exercise, especially having a conversation with a coach. They really start isolating the 1 or 2, maybe 3, usually 2 core values that really are the most meaningful ways to describe who they are, how they see themselves, and how they want to make sense of the world. And as such, they want to build their lives around this. They both have core values. We all do. They just need to be redeemed. And they're also who we want to become more of. So we often ask leaders when we engage with them, what type of leader do you want to become? Who do you want to become? And we sit on that conversation for 20, 30, 40 minutes. And what's beautiful about that is that narrative also breathes into what we want to build our life on. And those are those core values.
So I hear that the key thing here is to determine which values you would want to build your life around. As you were giving this example about interests in weather and coffee beans, I got really curious what value gets reflected there and how would you notice it?
Oh, I think after 2, it's interesting. So, Maris, between those 2, it's very difficult. I think you have to have a little bit more volume of information there. But my aim is to get to the core value. But maybe say one of the values that I have between the weather and brewing beans is control. I value control. The weather, knowing the weather gives me control of how I can adjust my day for the things I want to do. Brewing coffee and brewing different coffee, variety of coffee, but brewing it gives me control of the flavor that I want to get. And for me and my personality, my style, the way I was developed, but also in not a good way, I like to control as much as I can. And that's actually in itself very limiting and not very freeing. So having too much control leads to a deeper issue, not a value that I want to have, nor a core value I want to build on, which is pride. Right? I don't want to lose. I don't want to necessarily be unproductive. I want to be efficient. I want to be successful in all these worldly ways. Are those values? They are. But would I want to build all my life, all my relationships around those words? No, that's not who I want to become. That's not who I want to become. And so now we start getting into some of the deeper conversation, which would be that question, right? So if I know these things about me, and these are not the values I really want to hold, what are they? Well, who do I want to become, right? And that's a great conversation.
Yes, and I will repeat for the listeners that through this exercise of interests, you can discover all kind of values, but you have to decide on which ones you want to build your life around, which ones will be your core values, right?
Exactly, because actually the value of control is not necessarily a good value to live your life in relationship with others, is it?
Right. So we have explored how core values can guide us through uncertain seasons. As we wrap up the interview, is there anything else you would like to share or add?
Yeah, I just think that it's important for every person to really spend time with themselves, and spending time with yourself is not easy. But if you're a person that likes already to spend time in understanding of who you are and who you want to become, keep going, because it's the most important thing for your relationships. And learn to tell that story. Learn to tell the story of who you have become to this point and who you might want to become moving forward. I think if everybody takes time to do that more, I think the world would be a better place. Our relationships would be healthier, and we'd certainly have far more joy and peace in the world.
Yes. Could you please share where people can find you?
Of course. You just go to our website, restoredleader.com, and you will see links directly to our 3-part coaching process. We put that out there in a guidebook. It's a self-directed guidebook. And as such, you can go through the very exercise that I mentioned. And when you're ready and you want to have a conversation about it, feel free to schedule a call with us. I'd be happy to help you through that first part of identifying your core values and how that will then affect your leadership, whether it's at work, at home, or in community.
Yes, everyone listening, visit restoredleader.com and download the guidebook. The link will also be in the show notes. As a little bonus for listeners, I always like to throw in a fun question for my guest. What is something that has made you laugh really hard?
That's a good question. I have to think about that for a little bit. I laugh mostly at the silliest things in life. And the silliest things in life are usually those things that you don't talk about on podcasts. Or maybe you do. So,
Same space.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, there's just things in my family with my kids, that, I just enjoy watching us just do life together. And sometimes it's about language and what meaning is. And this is essentially what I do at work too. But, kids have a very, very interesting view on what words mean. And oftentimes they pick this up from school. And just sometimes to see them use the wrong words in sentences to mean what we know what the sentence is trying to say is very, very funny. It's funny, and it's actually a joyful funny to kind of watch my kids put together sentences using bigger words as they get older. So I know that was a very boring answer, but that's what makes me laugh often.
Not boring at all. Thank you for sharing. I think everyone who has kids can relate to this. And kids, as they grow up, constantly surprise us with linguistic innovation. Darren, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your insights, and thank you for guiding us through uncertain seasons.
You're welcome, Maris. Thanks for having me.
And that concludes today's episode of our podcast. This was an interview with leadership coach Darren Ho about how sticking to your core values can help you find a way through uncertain seasons. I highly recommend that everyone defines core values by downloading the guidebook from restoredleader.com and completing the exercise. Alternatively, links can be found in the show notes. I believe that investing in self-improvement is among the greatest gifts you can give to yourself and those around you. As always, check out the show notes in your app or go to storyclicks.us/podcast, where you can find resources mentioned in this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our podcast, share it with someone who might benefit from this, and leave us a rating or review. Thank you for tuning into this episode of our Story Clicks podcast, where we explore ways to grow your business, develop your creativity, and live better.